All right, so yesterday we read The Rough-Faced Girl. So today I'm going to reread it, but then you're also going to have some questions here on Ed Puzzle. So we have The Rough-Faced Girl by Rafe Martin, and David Shannon is the illustrator. Once long ago, there was a village by the shores of Lake Ontario. Make sure you can see it. All from the other wigwams of this village stood one huge wigwam. Painted on its sides were pictures of the sun, moon, stars, plants, trees, and animals. And inside this wigwam there was said to live a very great, rich, powerful, and supposedly handsome invisible being. However, no one could see him except a sister who lived there too. Many women wanted to marry this invisible being, but his sister said only the one who can see him can marry him. Now, in this village, there lived a poor man who had three daughters. The two older daughters were cruel and hard hearted, and they made their youngest sister sit by the fire and feed the flames. When the burning branches popped, the sparks fell on her. In time, her hands became burnt and scarred. Her arms too became rough and scarred. Even her face was marked by the fire, and her beautiful long black hair hung ragged and charred. And those two older sisters laughed at her, saying, "Ha, you're ugly, you rough-faced girl." And they made her life very lonely and miserable indeed. One day, these two older sisters went to their father and said, "Father, give us some necklaces. Give us some new buckskin dresses. Give us some pretty beaded moccasins. We're going to marry the invisible being." So their father gave them these things. Dressed in their finest, the two girls marched through the village. All the people pointed and stared. "Look at those beautiful girls," they said. "Surely they shall marry the invisible being." And if those two girls weren't proud and hard-hearted before, they were even prouder now. They walked haughtily through the village. At last they came to the wigwam of the invisible being, and there was his sister waiting. "Why have you come?" she asked. "We want to marry the invisible being," they answered. "That's why we're here." "If you want to marry my brother," she replied, "you have to have seen him. Tell me, have you seen the invisible being?" "Of course we've seen him," they insisted. "Can you see how pretty we are? Can you see the beautiful clothes we wear? Oh, yes, anyone can tell that we've truly seen the invisible being." "All right," she said quietly. "If you think you've seen him, then tell me, what's his bow made of?" And suddenly her voice was swift as lightning and strong as thunder. "His bow?" they stammered in surprise. "His bow, we know." But turning desperately to one another, they whispered, "What shall we say? Let's say it's the oak tree." So they said that. "No," said the sister of the invisible being. "No." Oh, she saw at once how they lied. "Tell me," she began, "if you have seen my brother, the invisible being, then what's the runner of his sled made of?" We know." And they decided to say the green willow tree, but that wasn't the truth either. So the sisters said, "No, you have not seen my brother. Now go home." "Just test us fairly," they exclaimed. "We've seen him. Just don't ask us all these silly questions." "All right," said the sister of the invisible being, "come with me." And she took them back to the great wigwam. And she sat them furthest from the entrance in the guest seats. Soon they heard footsteps coming from along the path, and something stepped in. Though they heard breathing, the two sisters couldn't see a thing. Suddenly a great bow and a beaded quiver of arrows appeared in the air and were set down. But though these two girls sat there, their eyes wide, although that night they saw not a thing, and in the morning they had to go home ashamed. So the next day, the rough-faced girl goes to her daddy, and she asks him for some things. But then remember, all he has is broken shells, some big moccasins, and just a little bit of tree bark. So she gathers those things together. She takes the little moccasins over to the river to make them smaller, but they're still a little big. Remember, they go flip flap as she walks, and people are yelling at her out yelling at her in the village, and they're saying, "Look at your strange clothes! Hey, hey, go home, you ugly girl! You'll never marry the invisible being." But she's brave and she has faith in herself, so she keeps walking right through the village. Now, as she walked on, she saw the great beauty of the earth and sky spreading before her, and truly she alone of all in that village saw in these things the sweet yet awesome face of the invisible being. Now she came to the shore, and there was the invisible being's sister. Now, the sister of the invisible being was a wise woman. When she looked at you, she didn't just see your face or hair or clothes. No, when she looked at you, she would look you right in the eyes, and she could see all the way down to your heart. And she could tell if you had a good kind heart or a cold heart and cruel one. And when she looked at the rough-faced girl, she saw at once that though her skin was scarred, her hair burnt, her clothes strange, she had a beautiful, kind heart. And so she welcomed her dearly. And so she asks her what his bow is made of, and she tells her it's the bend of the rainbow. And then she asks what his runner is made of, and the rough-faced girl says the spirit road of the Milky Way of stars that spreads across the sky. And so she realizes that, yes, the rough-faced girl does know. So then the invisible being comes in, and he's sitting there, and he says, "At last we have been found out." Then smiling kindly, he added, "And oh, my sister, she is beautiful." And his sister said, "Yes." Now the sister tells her to go on into the river and take a bath, and she gave her new buckskin robes and a perfect necklace. And she goes and bathes, and all her scars go away, and her hair is beautiful again. And so now everyone can see that she is beautiful. Then at last the rough-faced girl and the invisible being were married. They lived together in great gladness and were never parted. My favorite book. Hope it is yours too. Bye.